Every team will be looking to end the November window on a high. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. This weekend marks the official end of this November window of international test matches. It's been very enjoyable so far, and hoping that, it ends with a bang. Now, there is one more game next week. That's Wales versus South Africa, but that officially falls outside of the window. So, those two teams have one more game to go, but for everyone else, as I said, looking to end on a high, no matter how the November has gone so far, you want to win your last game just to give you that momentum going into the international off season, as it were, until next year, and just have that kind of buzz around your squad. Players go back to their club teams or provinces or wherever, and they have that kind of positive feeling. So everyone's going to want that for the team. Obviously, everyone's not going to get that, and we'll see who actually does manage it. But what we're going to do is, as usual, go down through the fixtures in order, talk about how the teams have done so far during November and how I think the game itself is going to go. So we're going to start with the first game of the weekend. That is on Saturday, 22nd of November, 2025. We have 4 games, and we're going to go through those 4. Then we'll deal with the 2 that are on Sunday. So the first game on Saturday is Wales versus New Zealand. Is at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. Kickoff is 3:10 p.m. local time. So you got Wales v New Zealand. Two teams who had obviously very different ambitions coming into this window. Wales pretty much just looking for a win under Steve Tandy. They got that last week against Japan, 24-23. Very tight for them. And you look at the previous result for them, where they got beaten 52-28 by Argentina at home in that first game under Steve Tandy. So they get that first win out of the way, and a first win in 2 years at the Principality as well. To give their home fans something to cheer about. And you probably think that's kind of like that emotional release that they got from that, I think, is probably going to affect how they play in this game as well. I think, it's going to be one of those ones where we've seen New Zealand do it a few times now this November, that once Wales get to kind of the 60-65 minute mark, I think New Zealand will be able to pull away if the game is close at that stage. Not sure whether it will be or not, honestly, by that point. But yeah, I think the height for Wales of this November campaign was last week, and they're going to be kind of on a downward slope. But I still think even if they lose this one, and even if they lose it well, there's still going to be a feel-good factor around the team, because they have a new coach in there. They've gotten the new era underway, and they have that win as well. So it's not the way it was before under Gatland, where it was like, okay, we've now got a record run of losses. How many losses is it going to be in a row? Obviously, he left, and then they went to Japan, and they got the win over there as well to finish that streak. But it doesn't feel like they're, even if they do lose, it doesn't feel like they're starting a new streak, as it were. I think they'll give themselves kind of chances in games, especially in the Six Nations. So I think that positivity from the window will carry forward no matter the result here. So for Wales, obviously you want your team to win, and the players want to win, the coaches want to win. But I don't think this result will affect them as much as if Gatland had been in place, and they got pretty much hockeyed by Argentina, just about scraped by Japan, and then potentially took another shellacking from New Zealand, it would have been a very different story. Coach at the end of his tenure compared to at the start of the tenure, there's a lot more kind of leeway there, I think, for the coach. So I think whatever happens, there's going to be a positive feel around the Welsh team. after this because of that win against Japan last week. But again, I think it's going to affect them in this game. New Zealand then, the dream of the Grand Slam Tour, obviously went last week, that 33-19 defeat to England. England looked absolutely superb in that game. New Zealand, some of their limitations highlighted in that game. Unlike against Scotland and Ireland, I think maybe if Ireland if Ireland were playing them this week, it would have been maybe a closer game. Ireland a bit cold going into there, and certainly, a lot of players kind of out of form as well, and they built themselves into form over the last couple of rounds. The win against Japan, and then the win last week against Australia. But I still think New Zealand probably maybe would have edged it, but it certainly would have been closer than it was in Chicago. But New Zealand, they came back against Ireland to win that game. Did the same against Scotland. Scotland, though, was a weird one because they took a 17-0 lead, left Scotland back to 17-all, and then they were able to pull away. And I think a lot of that was to do with Scotland themselves. They weren't able to kick on once they got even, and that left a window open for New Zealand to take it, whereas England didn't really leave any window open against them. It felt, New Zealand got that, I think it was a 12-0 lead, right? But then England just came steamrolling back on top of them, and after that 12-0 lead for New Zealand, England scored 33 points to 7 to win the game. And I've said it, England, I feel now, I think the world rankings are correct, because I said it last week as well before the game between England and New Zealand, that I think England are the best team in the Northern Hemisphere, and now they're the highest ranked team in the Northern Hemisphere as well. And they're I'd say still there's still a gap between South Africa and anyone else at the minute, but England are the team who look most likely to close that gap at the minute. New Zealand, they're second in the world at the minute, but it feels like England are on a kind of a steeper trajectory at the moment. So unless New Zealand kind of pick it up a bit, England potentially could overtake them in those world rankings, or at least in terms of their perceived rankings, even if it's not the official world rankings. At the moment, I think South Africa and New Zealand 1 and 2, but the gap between, I think, South Africa and New Zealand is much bigger than the gap between New Zealand and England, I would say, at the minute. But New Zealand now, they'll want to finish the tour on a bit of a high. There'll be real disappointment from last week, and there's going to be question marks as well over with the coaches and with the players, etc. Because you might look at that, and if you compare it, let's say, to a Northern Hemisphere team, right? If you went on tour and you're playing teams like New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, etc., and you come back with 3 wins out of 4, it would be seen as a really successful tour, and maybe go down in a bit of history for certain Six Nations teams as well. But New Zealand are judged by a higher standard, and for them, if they do go 3 out of 4, it's still going to be seen by certainly sections of the fans and the media as a bit of a failure, not a disaster of a tour, but certainly a bit of a failure of a tour, because they will see it as that England game was the big test for this team and on this tour, and that was the one game that they didn't deliver in. So in this game, I'm expecting a bit of a reaction from New Zealand, and couple that with the fact that Wales, as I said, for me, kind of peaked, certainly emotionally, last week against Japan. There's potential there for a big score. Now, Also, what you can get though is New Zealand maybe trying a little too much, because we've seen them, on this tour, more handling errors than we're used to seeing from players of that skill level. And that might actually keep the game a bit closer than you might expect early on. Wales, might grow in a little bit of confidence because of that. And then it might be another one of these where New Zealand have to kind of take it away in the last 20 minutes. So, but it's hard to see, honestly, a Wales winning this one. So I'm going to back New Zealand. Okay, on to the next one. This, I think, is the game of the weekend. I don't think anyone would dispute that. It's Ireland versus South Africa. And this one's at the Aviva Stadium. Kickoff is 5:40 p.m. So Ireland so far, as I said, they've been building through, that 26-13 loss against New Zealand in Chicago. Then made changes for the game against Japan, 141-10, but looked disjointed. And I think that scoreline kind of flatters Ireland a little bit and does Japan a little bit of, doesn't do Japan any favors, because I thought Japan were certainly better than losing by 31 points. And then last week against Australia, 46 points to 19, record win by Ireland over Australia. So, a big step up from them, but they need at least one more step up from that as well. Another big step up from there, or maybe even two, just to be competitive in this game. Because South Africa, for me, are hands down the best team in the world. And obviously back-to-back world champions, back-to-back rugby championship holders as well. And it feels like they're going away from everyone else. It doesn't feel like, that it's kind of nip and tuck with anyone. It feels like they're actually increasing their gap over the rest of the world. As I say, at the minute, England look like the only team who are maybe on a trajectory to actually start eating into that gap. But at the minute, they're not there. But they do certainly look like the most likely if somebody is going to kind of chew into that gap. And, two games in a row now, they've gone down to 14 men, against, sorry, let me get my bearings here. Against Italy, France. They lost a guy there, just before half time. So they had one half as 14 men. And then against Italy, it's like 10 minutes into the game or something, and they go down to 14. But they did so well to go through it. Italy caused them a few problems, but it never felt, to me at least, I'm sure it's different if you're a South African fan, but to me it never felt like South Africa were going to lose that game. It felt like they had that level of control to be able to just keep Italy at arm's length, and then get themselves a decent lead and then stretch away as well. And that's just, I think, the measure of those players, the confidence that they have, that there was no panic 2 weeks in a row when they went down to 14. People just did their job. Some people had to double up on things. You had the likes of Esther Hazen and Hooker on the sides of the scrums, and it didn't matter. They were still blowing Italy off the ball and winning penalties. And yeah, it's just a measure of the players, the coaches, how well prepared the team is and how good the players themselves are as well. And I talked about it before, you got to give a lot of credit to Razzie for that. He said about he's not happy with having, a really good, world-class 23 players to deal with. He wants to build two squads who are massively competitive, and you can see he's succeeding at it. You look at the team that played against South Africa they played against Italy, and they made changes for that, but the players that come in, are as good or only slightly below the players that they're replacing. And, there's massive depth there. And as a fan of the URC and someone who likes watching the South African teams in the URC as well, I know there's massive depth below that as well, in their URC teams who haven't yet been capped by the Springboks too. So it's not like they've got, just that group there of 40 odd players, which like 40 to 50 players who most of them are like world class. It's just amazing on its own. But to have players below that, who could develop to that level as well. So given all of that, and let's just quickly go over South Africa's results as well. So they beat Japan 61-7. That was at Wembley in London to kick off their November series. Then that game against France 32-17, where South Africa were the team that went down to 14 men for the second half, but they were the team that were showing ambition and they took the win because of it. Then last week, again, after 10 minutes, down to 14 players, and they win 32-14. And also just touching on something, I won't go on it too much, but I think both of those red cards should have been like yellows that went to the bunker. And should have been sorted there. Like I talked about before, that, as fans, when we heard the bunker system was coming in, we thought it was for stuff like this. So to see them just being like, no, it's permanent red card, there's going to be no further review. Like, then you really do think, well, what's the point of the bunker system? Because I thought that's what the bunker system was for, was to examine, especially last week where they said, well, we don't have an angle to show it on the big screen that he definitely hit the guy in the head, because they didn't show any angle that he hit him in the head. And so, well, then send it to the bunker and let the bunker come up with the actual angle that shows him hitting him in the head before you then turn it into a red card. But yeah, as I said, referees are following the laws and the protocol that's there, which is fine. But then for me, it means that the law and the protocol needs to be changed to make it better for everyone. But yeah, in terms of who's going to win this game, I'm obviously going to be cheering for Ireland, but it's hard to see like South Africa go into any game at the minute and not being the favourites. So I've got to pick South Africa as the winners of that one. Okay, next then we have France versus Australia. So two teams who've had, France have been mixed. And probably honestly disappointing, given that they were Six Nations champions. And Australia definitely disappointing so far this November. So it's a little bit of redemption, I think, for these two teams, coming into this final round. Because, if you look at, like, for France, the big game was that South Africa game. It was hyped up in terms of, oh yes, a World Cup and they're going to get revenge. And personally, I don't like that whole idea of like, we're going to get revenge for this or revenge for that. It's like, no, because like every time you play a team, it can't be about like revenge for the last time because you lost. For me, it should be just a case of we're going out there, we're playing against a brilliant team. We want to beat them. And if we beat them, we want to go on from there, rather than like, let's just focus on the last time we played these guys. Maybe for some people emotionally it helps them get up, but for me, I think it's a little bit overdone, honestly. But yeah, losing at home against South Africa, the way they did as well, like showing no ambition when they were playing against 14, was a bit of a shock. Then Fiji gave them a real game last week where they won 34-21. But again, not seeing like, the France really flourish so far. Like, we're not seeing the best of them. It feels like that maybe they peaked somewhere in the Six Nations when BL Berry was on fire. And then we look at Australia. Australia, they start off against England, well beaten, honestly, 25-7 by England, and their only score coming from an intercept. And, just when England looked like they were going to get in for another try, the intercept and the score, they offered absolutely pretty much nothing else in attack in that game. Then they go to Italy, where, playing in Italy, last time they played Italy was in Italy and they lost that game. They'd have lost 2 on the bounce to Italy, 26-19 in that game. And then you're expecting, okay, surely they're going to lift themselves against Ireland. Joe Schmidt used to be the coach of Ireland, the head coach of Ireland. He knows those Irish players very well. He's got to have some kind of, set moves that he can catch them out with, etc. And the only thing really we saw from them was that ability from close range to get over. They did it 3 times, getting over. That's a worry for Ireland, especially playing South Africa this weekend. But in terms of Australia, that was really the only positive they took from that game. Like, Ireland's line-out that's been, pretty poor, looked good. Australia's line-out looked terrible. And, the scrum didn't go well for them. No set piece, no platform. But they did well, honestly, to score 3 tries. But they conceded, 46 points and a record defeat against Ireland as well there. And they're the kind of records you do not want to set. So now coming into this one, they're, potentially looking at being winless in this November window. And if you look at them through the Rugby Championship, there were positive signs there. They certainly weren't challenging really for the title. Although there was one point where everyone was beating everyone, where everyone was still technically in the hunt for the title. But they certainly, had some highs in there, beating South Africa, in one of the games, was definitely, kind of the peak for them. But they were kind of mixed in the Rugby Championship, whereas they've just been poor so far this November. So they're, like France, going to want to finish on a high. And given that, I think that this game, it can go kind of 2 ways. I think both teams kind of tense up and you might get a scrappy, low scoring affair, or both teams might say, listen, let's play to our instincts, our kind of, our rugby DNA, and just put on a massive show. And it could be one of those ones where, it's high 30s score for both teams and an exciting game for us neutrals as well. But, given that, Australia seem to have forgotten how to win, I'm going to back France for the win in that one. Okay, next then we have Italy versus Chile, and this is in the Stadio Luigi Ferrari in Genoa. Kickoff is 8:10 p.m. So same time as that France versus Australia game. France Australia. Sorry, I don't know what I said. Stade de France in Paris. Kickoff 8:10. So both those games kicking off at the same time, which I don't get because you've only got 4 games on the Saturday. So put one a bit earlier in the day or something, and let us watch all of the games live. That would be my preference. But I guess broadcasters decide we want it in prime time slot. So both games kind of end up at the same time. So you got Italy, who I'd say to be fairly happy with their November. They got that win against Australia. They caused problems against South Africa, and they haven't, there was potential there. Like, let's say they lost by a score or 2 against Australia, say, and got absolutely destroyed by South Africa, that they'd be coming into this game, thinking, okay, well, let's get some consolation for our November. But they've had a decent November, and the thing now is to keep that concentration going and not just think, oh, it's only Chile, and we should definitely beat them, and then slip up. They want, again, you're going to want to finish on that high that everyone else does. It's good to see, Chile getting this game as well and being kind of at the top table for one game at least this November. They when I've seen them, they've looked really good. They've been exciting. They've got some players who really are kind of like, they're a very tenacious team, I think. And it's kind of a contrast in the World Cup where I felt like Italy, like heads go down too much of them, and Chile kind of the opposite, where they never felt, even if they were getting well beaten, they never felt like they were giving up. So it will be interesting, I think, to see if this is a close one. But I do think Italy are going to win it. Maybe not as comfortably as a lot of Italian fans would like. But again, it should be an entertaining game. It's a pity it's on at the same time as France-Australia, because that's the one that's going to draw all the eyes. It's probably the one I'm going to watch as well. And given there's so much rugby on at the weekend, I probably won't get to see Italy-Chile other than watching highlights. But yeah, I'm going to go for Italy in that one. So that's the end of the Saturday games. Okay, so let's have a look at the Sunday games. So Sunday, 23rd of November. The first game is Scotland versus Tonga. It's at Scottish Gas Murrayfield Stadium in Edinburgh. Kickoff 1:40 local time. So Scotland, I think, it's been a disappointing November window for them. Started off 85-0 against the USA. Players, you had Darcy Graham and Van der Merwe swapping the try scoring record between them through that game. But it may as well have been a training run in terms of actually getting them prepared for the next game, which was 17-25 defeat to New Zealand, where Scotland, first half they're losing by 10 points, and you're thinking, okay, get in at halftime, 10 points down. It's not brilliant, but it at least gives you a chance in the second half if you get an early score. They concede another try just before the break, lapse in concentration, and they go in 17-0 down instead of 10-0 down. Then second half, they get themselves back to 17-all, and you're thinking, there's a chance on here for them. But whether it was mental or physical, they didn't have the wherewithal to kick on from there. New Zealand then, took the game away from them in that last quarter and come up with the win. So they followed up then last week playing against Argentina. They're doing pretty well, leading 14-0 at half time. They score another try just after the break as well. But then Argentina worked their way back into the game. And Scotland, I think, last points with 64th minute penalty by Russell, and then no points after that. Whereas Argentina scored 3 tries in the last 10 minutes to take the win. And again, it's that ability in that last kind of quarter of the game. That we've seen a lot now this November. The teams that have it are the teams who are winning those games that are a bit tight, and Argentina fully deserve to win there. But yeah, Scotland now, they're playing against Tonga. Tonga's only game really against a Tier 1 nation this window. So they're going to be up for it. But again, I think Scotland they're going to kind of bookend a couple of disappointing performances with probably a couple of good performances, but not necessarily, good, what would you say, good kind of experiences, as it were, for their players, because those players, we know they have the talent, but it's that mental thing of getting the wins against the teams that they can't beat, and they're not delivering that. So expect in this one that Scotland probably will win, and it'll be one of those where Tonga will be competitive for a while and Scotland will pull away, because they do have that, in terms of teams like Tonga, they'll have that mental edge, but they don't have that mental edge when it comes against the likes of New Zealand, etc. And it feels like the only team that they really do have that against, that are kind of up in that bracket, would be England. If they could take what they're able to produce against England and produce that against the likes of Ireland, New Zealand, South Africa, etc., this will be a very different Scotland team because the talent is there, the ability is there. But yeah, it just feels like a mental thing for them. But I do expect them to win this. So I'm going for a Scotland win. And in the final game, then, two of the teams who've had really good November windows so far. England versus Argentina at the Allianz Stadium, Twickenham. Kickoff is 4:10 p.m. So England has just gotten better and better through this year and through this November as well. Started off 25-7 against Australia, looking pretty good in that game. Then against Fiji gives them a real test, but they're able to come through that 38-18 with the win there, even though they made some changes for it. And then last week, then a brilliant performance, one that I feel has shown the progress England have made. Winning 33-19 against New Zealand, and for me, as I said a few times now, England best team in the Northern Hemisphere and moving, it feels like France dipping a little bit, Ireland have dipped a lot, and England have overtaken both of them and are on that upward trajectory at the minute as well. So yes, a defeat here would be kind of a damp squib to end their window on, but you look at the other results and even if they do only go 3 from 4, I think you have to be very pleased with the November they've had. Then Argentina, they go to the Principality. They give Wales a hiding 52-28. Then they go to Murrayfield, losing at half time. Scotland extend the lead after the break as well, and then they're able to produce that comeback and win it in the last 10 minutes of the game. So they're going to be full of confidence as well. And this, is going to be certainly, I'd say, you've got France, Australia, and England, Argentina, kind of stand out as maybe joint number 2 of the weekend in terms of, I think Ireland, South Africa is the number 1 game of the weekend. But, this one, England, Argentina, it's 2 teams on the up, and it's 2 teams in the top 6 in the world as well. So for me, I would rank it above the France-Australia game, even though like France-Australia in terms of you think of the kind of glamour of the occasion, maybe sounds like a bigger fixture. Right now, I think England-Argentina is a bigger fixture because, as I said, England now number 3 in the world, Argentina number 6, and both teams are looking up the rankings, not looking down. And yeah, it's going to be a massive test, I think, for both of these teams, because Argentina, I've talked about it previously as well, is that I think in World Rugby, they're probably the team in terms of their ceiling and their floor with the biggest gap between them. Argentina can beat any team in the world, and they've shown it over the last few years when they're on it. But they can also lose to any team in the world as well. There aren't many teams knocking around at the minute who, could go into a game against South Africa or New Zealand, and win it. And it's shown that they did it in the Rugby Championship this year, being able to do that, beat those teams. But also, you could put them against an Italy side, and they could lose. They could lose that game as well. That's the kind of the difference between them. But it feels like this November, at least, they've found a little bit of consistency, and now can they produce it in this game? But whoever, like the team that wins this, is obviously going to be on a massive high. But I think the loser of the game as well will still look back at this November and feel like they've had a good window. And, it's going to be interesting to see in terms of England, how much they rotate their team. Are they going to put in One of the Smiths, either Marcus or Finn Smith at 10 instead of George Ford. Are they going to, it looks like they've found a good midfield partnership. Are they going to change that around? Are they going to switch out wings? What are they going to do in the pack? Is Pollock going to get a start? There's lots of question marks there in terms of what they're going to do in terms of their rotation. And that could definitely affect the result of this one as well. And it's kind of, honestly, in terms of the weekend, it's the most difficult one to call, because it is two teams who are absolutely on it at the minute. And just because England are at home, I think I'm going to edge it towards them. So they're going to say that England win. But yeah, I think it's going to be another exciting game and a good way, I think, to end the weekend as well. That we're going to have a bit of fireworks, I think, in that game. There's obviously going to be, normally is, between England and Argentina, a bit of niggle in there as well. And it feels like it's going to be a close one. But both teams have shown that they have that ability in that kind of last 15, 20 minutes to produce scores when they need them as well. So you could see, in that kind of last 10, 15 minutes, maybe if it's a close game, the lead changing hands, and it be one of those ones where somebody actually wins the game when the clock is in the red. That's what it feels like. Obviously, sometimes we look forward to games that they don't turn out that way, but it looks like an exciting weekend of rugby to me. Let me know what you think down in the comments.